Welcome, everyone. I'm Heather Bhandari, adjunct lecturer in visual arts, and tonight is my great pleasure to welcome you to the fifth visiting artist lecture of the school year and to introduce a brilliant guest, Legacy Russell. I've been a fan of her writing and her work overall for many years, and I know students have quoted her in many of my classes and many others. Um, but before we go any further and get into the details, I'd like to begin with a living land acknowledgement. Brown University is built on what is now called College Hill, part of the unceded ancestral homelands of the Narragansett Indian tribe. Indigenous people from many nations, near and far, live, study, and work in Providence. Today, the amplification of Native voices and histories is crucial to rectifying the many violent legacies of colonialism, and we gratefully acknowledge the ongoing critical contributions of Indigenous people within the university, across the state, region, and country. In addition, I would like to acknowledge that we are connected by a campus that relied on the African slave trade in the Americas, and that there are buildings on campus constructed by enslaved people. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for necessary decolonial work, but a reminder of place, of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustained and enriched the stolen land we are speaking from today. These acknowledgements and much more commit us to a lifetime of decolonial and anti-racist work. Moving on to a few things I'd like to mention before we begin. First, please do not record this event. We value and respect the IP of our visiting artists, and we'll post our recordings on our YouTube account with the artist's permission. Still shots are great. Just please tag at Brown Visual Arts and at L Russell, ELLERUSTLE. Second, after Legacy's presentation, there will be a Q&A, and it's going to be a longer Q&A than usual, so think of your questions in advance. There are 2 microphones in the aisles that you see, so just come up to the mic as soon as you have your question ready and ask. It's expected that everyone be kind, courteous, and respectful in their questions, and only 1 question per person. Now, I'd like to thank Ed Osborne, Chair of Visual Arts, Winnie Gear, CJ Liu, Christine Dodd, and Media Services for facilitating this evening's event. Now on to Legacy. Legacy Russell is a curator and writer born and raised in New York City. She's the executive director and chief curator of the experimental arts institution, The Kitchen. If you don't know The Kitchen, please look it up right now on your phones immediately. It's where experimental musicians, performance artists, visual artists, dancers, and multidisciplinary geniuses go to work through and premiere new works. It's astounding and inspiring, and to steer that ship is a feat that Legacy does beautifully. Her academic, curatorial, and creative work focuses on gender, performance, digital selfdom, internet idolatry, and new media ritual. She's the recipient of the Thoma Foundation 2019 Arts Writing Award in Digital Art, a 2020 Rauschenberg Residency, a recipient of the 2021 Creative Capital Award, a 2022 Pompeii Commitment Digital Fellow, a 2023 Center for Curatorial Leadership Fellow, and a 2024 Five Lunder Institute for American Art Fellow. Her first book, many of you have read, called Glitch Feminism, a Manifesto, that was in 2020. And her second book is Black Meme, 2024, which she's gonna focus on tonight. Her debut chapbook, Gay Pompeii, is shipping any minute now. On a personal note, Legacy has always championed BIPOC and LGBTQIA+ artists, and something I really admire is her care for intergenerational conversations that's more rare than you would think. She's quick to cite references. Her lecture on footnotes is a must-hear, so look that up online also. She's quick to thank influences and forge new paths so that we all might think critically and find new intergenerational, interdisciplinary spaces together and for each other. So please help me in welcoming Legacy Russell.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here with you all this evening. I want to apologize in advance. My voice is a little scratchy. I've been traveling this past week and just got back from the Scandinavian tour of Black Meme, which was very interesting, as one can imagine. I am going to do a little bit of reading to contextualize Black Meme, its research work, the book. And then I'm going to screen a video essay. A little bit of context about the video essay. I have always created kind of visual texts and essays with new media as a means of beginning research projects. It's a way of kind of building a methodology to stitch together different ideas, chapter sequences, and kind of modes of being as images move through the world. So with this in mind, as I've moved through many of the programs tied to the production of this book, it's felt really important to think through what is the fine line between the space where we talk about mimetic Blackness, where we perpetuate mimetic Blackness, and where we refuse it. And so, of course, it feels like a ripe opportunity to screen this video essay that was created in 2020 at the beginning of some of the work and research here, and then, of course, to share with you a bit of the book as now has entered into the world in 2024. So Brother Fred Moten writes, "The history of Blackness is a testament to the fact that objects can and do resist." Let's start with a kiss. We begin this history with an act of Black love. In particular, we begin with the kiss between Bahamian-American performer and recording artist Bert Williams and performer and Harlem entrepreneur Odessa Warren Gray that takes place at the end of the 1913 American black and white silent film Lime Kiln Field Day. The story of mimetic Blackness, the copying and transmission of Blackness as mimetic material, the Black meme for which this book has been named, cannot start without discussion of Lime Kiln Field Day, which is now widely reputed to be the oldest surviving film featuring Black actors. Black love will carry us as we start. The kiss between Williams and Gray, which you will see in the video essay, is a rare moment of intimacy between two Black actors, deeply unusual for this period. It also shows Williams in blackface, a mark of the convention of the time, requiring that on stage and on screen alike, Black characters be performed by actors wearing the minstrel makeup, even if the actors themselves were Black. Williams's wearing of blackface was for him more than mere convention, however, for it provided him with a mask that stood strategically between him and the world. This created a bamboozling, perhaps farcical protective shield that, despite its link into a troubled and racist American history, allowed him to continue to rise within his industry. At this time, Williams was one of the most famous Black performers of the 1900s. Over a century later, Lime Kiln Field Day features prominently in artist and filmmaker Garrett Bradley's 2019 film, America. Bradley reflects on her own film as it engages these complex histories. What I loved about watching Bert Williams's Lime Kiln Field Day was witnessing an early example of an integrated effort in support of a Black vision. This is part of what made the film so special, and I think propels us even now as individuals, communities, and institutions 107 years later. The film's rushes were only found in 1939 by the first film curator of the New York's Museum of Modern Art, Iris Berry, among a larger institutional acquisition of 900 negatives from the trailblazing Bronx-based Biograph Studios in the wake of the closure of the studio's facilities. In the 1970s, these rushes were transferred to Safety Film stock, and in the 1980s, MoMA began the process of their restoration. But it was not until 2004 that MoMA film curator Ron Magliozzi began putting together the various components of the restored materials. Years later, Magliozzi spoke about Lime Kiln Field Day, saying, "I would like it to go viral." Magliozzi imagines a particular sort of distributed future for this footage, explaining, "We, the MoMA, would like to give it back to the community, the Black artists." As a curator, I had a vision of giving it to important Black artists and having them edit it, sample from it, and do whatever they want to it. Here, Magliozzi draws us into the tensions of, on the one hand, a sort of fantasy of cultural reparations, a giving of privatized, institutionalized, archival material back into a creative Black community. And on the other, a deployment of the language of meme culture in a hope for the eventual virality of this early record of Black film. With Limekiln Field Day owned by MoMA and under the custodial care of a white male curator, Magliozzi's dream of virality does little to resist the American tradition of white institutional gatekeepers' control over the transmission of Black cultural production and their establishment of themselves as the ones who decide who should, and in turn who should not, be canonized as an important Black artist. In this way, Magliozzi bends history, bringing the labor of an early record of Black embodiment, a genesis story of Black movement within Black visual culture, to meet the fractal and rhizomatic transmission of this material. This is achieved via the vehicle of mimetic transfer, complicating the authenticity of the material's agency from the vantage point of the present. It is a fortunate turn of history, then, that an artist such as Bradley is among the first to carefully undertake this urgent and essential work of considering the ways in which Limekiln Field Day can travel into the world as an empowered Black data. Her America intersperses 12 short black and white films with the found footage featuring Williams and Gray. Bradley speaks about her engagement with Limekiln Field Day in her own film using the language of the internet as algorithmic work. Accordingly, this work sets out the ways in which these two films, now forever bound together, can help to reprogram visual culture, giving us new ways of seeing. It also provides a new genesis for the birth of moving image in America itself. Bradley explains, "If I titled the work something so large, I ran the risk of being embarrassed. I certainly thought about that quite a bit. But I was willing to take that chance if it meant that when someone Googled America, new images could pop up. That's why I think about it as, hopefully, an extended project that many people can create in their own iterations, in their own way, to repopulate the algorithm." Bradley's work as a filmmaker to repopulate the algorithm is a worthy and ambitious task when we consider what America, a radical imaginary, and even perhaps a judicious counter-narrative is up against amid the broader undertow of American visual culture. One film in particular acts as the root of this American way of seeing. The cultural and social text of D.W. Griffith's silent epic, The Birth of a Nation, cited as well in the video essay that you'll see, made 2 years after Limekiln Field Day in 1915, is both undertow and riptide. It is a dramatization of the history of Civil War in America that offers, through words and images, the foundations of a now universal feature of contemporary online life, the GIF image format as we now know it today. Griffith's film was post-truth before the term even became popular. The work itself advances a virulently racist agenda at the birth of American cinema while constructing a visual national story. Griffith's film was directed during his time at Biograph Studios, the same studio that produced Limekiln Field Day. However, the studio was closed in 1915, prompted by Griffith's departure, a demonstration of his power in the industry during this period. That same year, The Birth of a Nation was screened at the White House, courtesy of then President Woodrow Wilson, and was only the second film ever shown at the presidential residence. It was lauded by Wilson as like writing history with lightning. The Birth of a Nation is a key example of both transmission of a counterfactual representation of Black movement and gesture, made minstrel in its racist performance of white actors in blackface, and the strategic application of minstrel Black embodiment as a tool of political propaganda. The film itself, cited as a recruiting tool for the Ku Klux Klan, has been a feature of cinema studies syllabi as early example of filmic practice. At the same time, as film critic Richard Brody writes, Birth of a Nation is the kinetic model for a century of action scenes. It has therefore become the original sin of American cinema, both in form and in meaning. As producer Stephen J. Schneider notes, the film introduced the use of dramatic close-ups, tracking shots, and other expressive camera movements, parallel action sequences, cross-cutting, and other editing techniques that established a precedent for much of Hollywood cinema, as well as internet-age mass media that draw upon it, including today's widely circulated reaction GIFs. These GIFs, as moving images, now ubiquitous as stickers and text messages, social media posts, and online forum discussions, often depict well-known TV or film characters and their reactions or responses. They regularly feature Black performers, so much that Black reaction GIFs is a searchable category in and of itself on the GIF search engine Giphy. In a twist of fate, the failure of the original copyright holder to renew Birth of a Nation resulted in its fall into the public domain. This meant that anyone could duplicate and sell the copies of the film, amplifying its virality. In 2015, critic and Time editor Richard Corliss wrote for Time magazine, Griffith's film is estimated to have earned $18 million in its first few years, the astounding equivalent of $1.8 billion today. In current dollars, only director James Cameron's blockbuster Avatar and Titanic have earned more worldwide. Further, Birth of a Nation shows us the ways in which the so-called away-from-keyboard world has been shaped as a reflection of what we see on our screens. Conversely, Griffith's film demonstrates how we see on our screens and holds a mirror up to the flawed world around us. We can see an example of this in the rise of the Karen meme, a moniker used, in the words of one journalist, as a stand-in for problematic white women. As well, the online AFK loop comprises an infrastructure that did not begin with the internet. Rather, the internet has only accelerated a pre-existing link, making it faster and easier for the visuality of race, class, gender, and beyond to move between localities and publics both on and offline. For this reason, it becomes important here to recognize that the Black meme acts as both a trope and a trap. This troubled relationship is as much about the transmission of Blackness as it is about the sight and viewership of whiteness. The tension here is therefore inescapably compounded and complicated. I'll pause here so we can screen the film.
Morning, quite recently, there was an article in the New York Times on Lorraine Hansberry and a play downtown off Broadway called To Be Young, Gifted, and Black, produced by her. And there was a picture of her there. And it was a picture that I have seen many times before. But photography, as you know, has its own way of communicating, just as all mediums do.
What happened at the New Orleans? Bitch, I'm back. I'm popular the man.
Y'all haters corny with that Illuminati mess. Paparazzi catch my fly and my cocky fresh. I'm so reckless when I rock my Givenchy dress. I'm so possessive, so I rock his rock necklaces. My daddy Alabama, mama Louisiana. You mix that Negro with that Creole, make a Texas Bama. I like my baby hair with baby hair and afro. I like my Negro nose with Jackson 5 nostrils. Earned all this money, but they never take the country out me. I got hot sauce in my bag, swag.
Oh yes, you best to believe it.
Y'all haters corny with that Illuminati mess.
Yeah, this is happening. See, this is me on the cell phone. They not with me. Bring up the George, your brake light, girl. You all have one activated cactus brake light. That's going to be your capture center. Your third brake light, which is up here on top. And then the back here. It's going to go. You have to like finish it. Driver at gunpoint.
The picnic near the lakeside in Chicago is the start of a lazy afternoon, early one October. We begin with a scene 1 meter wide, which we view from just 1 meter away. Now, every 10 seconds, we will look from 10 times farther away, and our field of view will be 10 times wider. This square is 10 meters wide, and in 10 seconds, the next square will be 10 times as wide. Our picture will center on the picnickers, even after...
I'm not sure I've ever seen that from Serena Williams.
Galaxies like us is what most of space looks like. This emptiness is normal. The richness of our own neighborhood is the exception. The trip back to the picnic on the lakefront is a set up version reducing the distance to the Earth's surface from 1 power of 10 every 2 seconds. In each 2 seconds, we will appear to cover 90% of the remaining distance back to Earth. Notice the alternation between reactivity and also inactivity, a rhythm that will continue all the way to our next roll of a proton in the nucleus of carbon beneath the skin on the hand of the sleeping man at the picnic. 10 to the 9th meters, 10 to the 8th, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Police! Help! Help! Police! I'm sorry, I can't hear you, man. Why don't I have any gay guests on my show? Wait, I'm sorry, why don't I have any gay guests on my show? Well, there are a lot of gay guests who really don't like to talk about their sexual preference, so we don't know whether they're gay or not. You know? Now, this ain't Merv. You didn't think I'd run from this, did you? This ain't Johnny. I ain't gonna run from it. I'm gonna deal with it.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I got sent a link by a good friend of mine here on YouTube, EDP445. Funny dude. Go check out his channel. He grew up in the same neighborhood I grew up in, so go check him out. But he sent me this link of this new trend. It's called Trayvoning, and this is some disrespectful shit. You got a whole bunch of people laying on the ground with a bag of Skittles and an Arizona iced tea, emulating the death of Trayvon Martin. And, this is some highly, highly disrespectful shit. And this goes back to what I talk about, how, this country has, first of all, a lack of respect for the black community, and second, just don't give a damn about our deaths that happen in our community that are provoked by people of other ethnicities. And, when I saw it, I was like, this is a damn shame. And somebody need to take these motherfuckers out, point blank, period. And if you notice, I want you guys to pay attention to who the ethnicity of these people are. I want you guys to pay close attention to that. But that's all I got to say, man. And the disrespect has got to stop.
haven't had somebody on the show because they're gay? What's wrong with you, man? I'm black. I'm black, man. I'm black, man. I'm the biggest minority you know about.
I feel like it was very appropriate to get married to the state of New York. To the state of New York.
You've got everything except the bride.
I'm all of both worlds here.
Hookah chaka, hookah, hookah, hookah chaka, hookah, hookah, hookah chaka, hookah, hookah, hookah chaka, hookah, hookah, hookah chaka.
It's no disguise. It's no disguise. It makes no sense. It doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
First of all, let me say good after late afternoon. Because of the HIV virus that I have attained, I will have to retire from the Lakers today. I just want to make clear, first of all, that I do not have the AIDS disease, because I know a lot of you want to know that, but HIV virus. My wife is fine, she's negative, so no problem with her. I plan on going on living for a long time.
During this period at the Department of Education, my working relationship with Judge Thomas was positive. I had a good deal of responsibility and independence. I thought he respected my work and that he trusted my judgment. After approximately 3 months of working there, he asked me to go out socially with him. What happened next and telling the world about it are the two most difficult experiences of my life. It is only after a great deal of agonizing consideration and great number of sleepless nights that I am able to talk of these unpleasant matters to anyone but my close friends. I declined the invitation to go out socially with him and explained to him that I thought it would jeopardize at the time I considered to be a very good working relationship. I had a normal social life with other men outside of the office. I believed then, as now, that having a social relationship with a person who was supervising my work would be ill-advised. I was very uncomfortable with the idea and told him so. I thought that by saying no and explaining my reasons, my employer would abandon his social suggestions. However,
Are you rolling, Abby?
Okay.
Alright, that's okay.
You dressed right for it.
And he said he's a little chilly, so this is good for him. So somebody will enjoy it either.
Okay. Anytime.
Okay, my name is Tupac Shakur, and I attend Tampapai High School, and I'm 17 years old.
Do you like being 17?
And it's like 17 is such a weird age. It's such a in the middle age. You're not 18 yet, and you're older than 16. So. But I like it. It's nice.
Something for my godson Elijah and a little girl named Corinne.
I just want to say, you know, can we all get along? Can we get along? Can we stop making it horrible for the older people and the kids.
You know, you have to have something to offer in order to lead. The mother usually becomes the mother because she's usually the best one out of the group. I'm Willie Ninja, the mother of the house of Ninja.
Give him what he wants!
I'm the mother of the house of Ninja because they say I'm the best voter out. To be the mother of the house, you have to have the most power. Take a real family. It's the mother that's the hardest worker, and the mother gets the most respect. As far as naming my house, the house of Ninja. Ninjas hit hard, they hit fast, an invisible assassin, and that's what we are. We come out to assassinate.
The House of LaBeija is the legendary house above all of them. I have the most members, I'm the most popular. New York City is wrapped up in being LaBeija. So it speaks for itself. And I am the fiercest mother out of all of them.
LaBeija wouldn't be quartet in that house.
That was a disqualification for the contestant. Just as picky as a ball. For those little flaws like that, that's because that's a part of shade. That's the idea. Knock them out if you can. Get them anyway. Hit them below the belt. Shade comes from reading. Reading came first. Reading is the real art form of insult.
Now you want to talk about reading? Let's talk about reading. What is wrong with you, Pedro? Are you going through it? You're going through some kind of psychological change in your life?
We're coming up to round 14. We have. I got 841.
That's a part of shade. That's the idea. Knock them out if you can. Get them anyway. Hit them below the belt. Shade comes from reading.
Go home or go to your church. This march will not continue. Is that clear to you? I've got nothing further to say to you.
I go hard in the motherfucking paint, nigga. Leave you stankin', nigga. What the fuck you thinking, nigga? I go hard in the motherfucking paint, nigga. Leave you stankin', nigga. What the fuck you thinking, nigga? I won't die for this shit or what the fuck I say. Front yard, broad day with the S.
So you see why I use moving images as part of research. I'm happy to answer questions that have come up in viewing, but I also am happy to unpack a little bit of what we just saw. Some of what Black Meme addresses is looking at the relationship as well of where advancements in technology are predicated on contributions by Black people and through Black cultural production. So, generationally, I may be aging myself, but many of these different points were relevant to me in thinking about some of the core questions as momentum in this work and research. We can kind of think about, for example, the citation of what has now become known as the dancing baby, which many note as kind of the first viral GIF, also known as the Uga Chaga baby. It was the dancing figure that was on the screen. This was an invention that came into being via a kind of experiment of sorts with a group of folks that were working together to kind of think about histories and traditions of movement and how affect could be communicated on our screens. And what was, I think, most compelling about that is that, it was something that was very visible in the period of time where I was growing up, but then as well, right, kind of thinking back on that, the idea of this racialized logic being applied on an infant form, and then, of course, having it be transformed into a monument of spectacle that was traded across screens and across geographic regions as a material of ridicule, of course, is something that was significant and that informed in many ways what was a mutation of this baby form that transgressed across a wide range of diasporas. So there were versions of this that were kind of drawing from all sorts of racialized positions. And in fact, actually, the other name for this baby was the cha-cha baby. So, the dance that the baby is doing, in fact, actually is not the cha-cha, but the core assumptions around an Afro expression of dance in itself, and thinking about what that meant was an inspiration for its movements as created by white individuals who were thinking about Black affect and how that could be popularized. There also, at the same time, were moments, of course, in this timeline of thinking about other modes of technology. For example, Michael Jackson's Thriller. And of course, with the rise of Thriller and its popularity as it became, known as a major contribution within the music video and MTV era, the way in which Michael Jackson, of course, contributed to this was, very much so a direct correlation as well to the entry of the VHS tape into the domestic spaces of the home, and as well the VCR. So literally, the rise of the VCR and its popularity and its capacity for it to exist as a technology that then became possible to circulate different types of material came out of that era, and of course via the contributions of Michael Jackson. And then we think about Black Meme in relationship to this question of a blueprint, right? And part of the reason why I wanted, of course, to include an excerpt of the testimony of Anita Hill is, of course, because so much of what we see there in the mass broadcast of Anita Hill's testimony transformed how we think about public and private space, set a precedent as well for how we think about feminisms and, of course, workplace relationships and as well policymaking. And so this, of course, is predicated on really a viral broadcast of a Black woman who had to explain for herself why it was that her boundaries, of course, were violated both within her workplace and beyond, right? So to think about that in relationship to public spectacle, and then, of course, how that exists as an architecture across many other points of public witness and testimony, Christine Blasey Ford and otherwise, as we have seen across different decades. So these are things that I think are necessary to reflect on, and when we think about the relationship across these different points in material. And part of the thing that often comes up when we talk about the Black meme, and what often comes up too when I'm doing talks, and especially as well in visiting classrooms, is folks asking, we thought that this was going to be a funny thing, right? So thinking about the framework of Black meme as being a point of humor and the core assumptions around that. There is a bit of a necessary bait and switch in just the titling alone because of the fact that I think the core assumptions around mimetic Blackness is so associated with ridicule. And so, the theft of Black affect and as well how that is circulated, we can see as well within some of what was excerpted, but as well, within this, very much so reflecting forward as to how to kind of ground this as a conversation, to think about the relationship of a period of time that predates screens and the internet as we now know it, being at the edge of a very complex period of time and kind of the collapse, I think, of many different types of media and the ways in which that has shifted our conception of truth, and to broaden our viewfinder in really asking questions about what it means to be accountable and to be responsible to the materials that we circulate. So these are some of the things, of course, that have been motivating forces within this work and research, and I would love to hear from some of you. Everyone is always very shy around these topics. Did you recognize any of the clips? I think it's very interesting. I often when I'm speaking to folks across different generations see that there are a wide range of approaches in terms of core priorities and where people have their attention drawn. So, I think that it's a great opportunity as well to be here with folks that are coming from different disciplines, media, modes of expression, to be able to reflect about what was most visible to you. I'm glad that there are some people who look like they're about to ask some questions.
Thank you so much, first and foremost. I feel like the association of Black meme as being humorous centers and really takes into consideration a specific type of audience and a specific type of gaze.
That's right.
For me, personally, what Black memes, how they function, is actually showing a kind of editing strategy that actually really decenters a white gaze and a white audience. My question, though, is it possible for a meme to exist without memeing anti-Black violence or anti-Black sensibilities for consuming images, et cetera? Is that possible? And then maybe also related, is there a difference between memification versus the concept of reproduction or replication? And how are you thinking about these terms in relation to each other and in relation to who's doing the consuming?
I agree. I think actually so much of what ongoing work has been is to be critical of this kind of question of publics and audience. And so the idea of as well, this question of what happens when certain things travel outside of different types of company is also a critical motivation within this work. And I think that some of the different components too, in terms of different tiers of visibility and the materials that are cited, which move from thinking about everything from the period of time of 1900, thinking about lynching postcards, thinking about moments in terms of Birth of a Nation and its initial screening, of course, at the White House, thinking about as well the rise of viral video as we think about the material of the VHS tape entering the home, which then, of course, allows for us to think differently as well about figures like Rodney King within history, of course, with the film of Rodney King and the beating at the hands of the LAPD. Where we, of course, have to ask the question, would it have even been possible to have that be documented had we not had an advancement in thinking about the VHS tape and the materials of this becoming something that could be more accessible to a wider public, so that George Holliday could make that document. And then, of course, to think about this question of publics, right? To have that material then go from the public realm into a viral sequence that then traveled not only locally, nationally, internationally via the news, but then, of course, in the early 90s was shown at the Whitney Biennial. One of the questions I think that often comes up when I ask about modes of public is, why was it that, in the period of time that was shown in the early 90s, that there were not mass protests at the Whitney around the presentation of this material as essentially a art piece, right? And that George Holliday was, according to some of the accounts, compensated as an artist for this material to be shown. And I believe, it's kind of looking at the record of it, that of course it comes down to who the core audiences were that were entering into that institution, had access to that space at that time. So I think that there are some very tense lines there. I don't think actually that the mission of the work is to say that all Black memes come with a hazard, right? And so I actually contest that, and I agree very much so with your position that it does come down to, of course, one's publics, and then also, of course, I don't believe that the framework of Black transmission is inherently violent. I think that really what is most important, though, however, is to think about this question of agency, right, and as well of consent, and then also to be asking questions about what is predicated in terms of these models of ownership and engagement, because really, I think the circulation in itself, right, often creates economies where there's a high level of visibility and recognition, but there is no compensation for what that looks like. And so really this, as we've continued to do, many of these discussions through and beyond classrooms, has been the critical point, which I think is very important to spend time with, is talking about, how, of course, property in and of itself has been predicated on Black people, and the framework of that being something that, of course, maps back, as we define within this work and research, Black data and its transmission to the Middle Passage. So the original machine itself being actually the ships that move Black people through the ports as part of the transatlantic slave trade. And then to really ask questions about, if we're seeking, for example, a different set of assumptions around publics, right? How can we maybe inform differently our discourse around this in relationship to how images move? So I hope that answers your question. I think that it's a very wide and complicated arena. And I think as well, we're entering into a period of time which one could argue has existed now for some decades, because the internet has always been part of the dilemma. But I think there is a increasing consciousness around how, of course, this as a tool is in many ways, right, a platform that has to be rebuilt. And so the revisioning of that, I think, is going to be a critical topic as we move into, of course, the ongoing politics that we are seeing unfold with this current administration and beyond.
I feel you already, I feel you already answered my question, so I don't know if I should repeat it, but I was going to ask more on kind of jumping off what the person before said about how the Black meme is also, it's I think of a lot of like some of the examples of like popular Black memes or like audio clips are taken from like interviews of just interviews of Black people like on the scene who have witnessed or experienced something traumatic, like the lady whose, I think, apartment building burned down, and she said, "I have bronchitis, ain't nobody got time for that." Or the, I forget his name, but he was this light-skinned gentleman with a red bandana who was like, "Hide your kids, hide."
Right, and then they cut it up and chopped and screwed it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of that in how the internet sort of, in removing like the image and just taking, I'm just thinking of audio, in removing the image and just taking the audio, you're sort of like cutting the person, like the physical body, away from the meme. Like you're, I don't know how to explain it. It's like it's continuing what you spoke about in terms of affect.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, how does that relate to the concept of digital blackface? And how now there seems to be a trend, especially with like, well, they say that because of more conservative politics, that there's like the movement towards like people being more dressing more conservatively and everything. So a lot of these like fashion I'm sorry, I'm going off topic. But now there's like a movement to the clean girl aesthetic, and people are saying we're moving away from the BBL era, and in part of like the BBL era, which was like the 2012s-ish, and also during like Black Lives Matter protests and the rise of TikTok, digital blackface was discussed a lot.
Yeah,
so that's my question.
I think it's a great series of questions. So to maybe unpack a little bit. So there's an amazing essay, of course, that Sylvia Wynter wrote called No Humans Involved that came out of the period of when Rodney King was beaten at the hands of LAPD. And it was in response to what is kind of a taxonomy and designation the LAPD was using to describe Black people, and often as well working class people, people who were sex workers, folks that were assigned as other within a kind of broader surveillance by the state. And that, of course, Wynter critiques this because it maps very much so to a framework of redefining and understanding Blackness in its relationship or in its distance from how human beings are seen, perceived, and of course, associated with Black people or not. And so, in tracing this lineage, I think it's a really interesting thing because, of course, with a lot of my work, I'm thinking very much so about the relationship, of course, of Blackness to the cyborg, and this question as well of no human involved, and what it means really to think about these taxonomies as, of course, being anti-Black, classist, sexist, and transphobic taxonomies, but then at the same time, right, to be also asking questions around what does it mean to really ask about Black people in relationship to the framework of the machine. So when you think about, as you said, right, the kind of chopping and screwing of certain viral material, part of the thing for me that has been most interesting about that is the very idea that it is material to be culturally reproduced and then made into entertainment, right? That, of course, would be the obvious conclusion for any material, be it tragic or otherwise, right, of Black people as they exist in the world. And so, the news reportage, of course, getting folks outside of their homes who are responding to things in real time is, one thing that becomes a trend within that. And then creating, the musical interlude and, having that become something that is picked up and appears on TV and exists in a wide range of medias. You often, of course, are finding that the folks that are cited are, ending up at the end of this in the broader arc without any compensation and no viral fungibility around the economy of their work, right? If we're assuming, how that functions. Whereas, of course, right, and other modes of creator economies, right, that there is, of course, a different type of recognition that comes with economic compensation. So, I think as well, when you map this back to digital blackface, it's a really important question. And I also, always appreciate the point and counterpoint between digital blackface, which, does everyone know what that is? Yeah. It's always good when I'm at schools because students know what those things are. But thinking about this in relationship to digital blackface and really asking questions about, what does it mean to allow for folks to be able to use Black images as a form of contemporary minstrelsy, and then at the same time to be thinking about the colorist interfaces, the traditions of colorism that exist within these digital platforms that allow for people to move or gain ascendancy in terms of Black people by having the algorithms that recognize their visibility, their humanity, right? And then to your point, right, the kind of the clean lines, right, of a kind of class ascendancy be possible via the lightening of their skin using these filters. So the relationship between those 2 points, I think, comes with a lot of tension. And then as well, really asking questions too about, what does it mean to think about the relationship, of course, of Black to digital blackface in the broader arc of Black minstrel practices. And of course, this is also the reason why this book begins with this bizarre and challenging and tender and vulnerable point of Bert Williams and Odessa Warren Gray, because of course, right, so much of what we know about blackface as we, of course, have charted that lineage comes comes down to us thinking about white people or non-Black people in blackface, which we see as it travels online today. But in this case too, in a genesis point that has been significant for cinema, it has required Black people to assume blackface as a means of even representing their humanity. And so that in itself, I think, becomes a really complicated interrelationship. And then we have to really think about, in this moment now, how is that being perpetuated? What are those next steps and stages? And of course, within that too, what is the value set that is being affirmed when the visibility and legibility of Black forms can only circulate when those tropes are abused? Thank you for your question.
Hi, thank you for that. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about the relationship between AI and Black memes, because it seems like AI is all about gathering a lot of data and about regularities, et cetera, and so on. And Black meme is so much about, even as it's decontextualized, it's always about specificity, right? It's about a response to a particular situation. Antoine Dotson, right, the example that was mentioned, and his sister being almost raped, right? That is the moment. In the end, it doesn't become about that,
right?
But it's necessary at the origin point. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on what the relationship between Black memes and AI is.
I mean, I think that there's so many things to think about in relationship to AI, but to break out a few things, I mean, there's the question of labor around this, right? So to kind of pull out a few pillars, the labor around AI and the core assumptions as to how AI currently has been trained, right? Thinking about that in relationship, of course, to Black culture as being core to what it means for AI to become contemporary and to be determined modern, right? And so the labor of Black people being a part of what that looks like, I think certainly is a key point of inflection in this current moment as we see many of the discourse, ChatGPT and otherwise, as to how folks are relating to this idea of the sort of digital other. I also think that there have been some phenomenal writings around even just thinking about kind of Black English, right? And I will kind of note, of course, there's Baldwin's amazing essay, which talks about Black English and kind of puts forward the question: if this is not Black English, what is, right? And then, of course, thinking about that in relationship to the lineage to Manuel Arturo Abreu's phenomenal essay around imagined online Black English, which I feel the correlation between those two important contributions to this question now of thinking about this in relationship to AI is significant, because what it points to is that African-American vernacular and also queer vernacular has been significant in creating a new economy around how some of this moves. To complicate it further, I also recognize that there has been a great rise as well in thinking about viral performance and the kind of frame of the hologram, what it means to kind of resurrect what I think are often kind of anti-Black frameworks of Black performance, so that Black labor essentially can perform forever without a framework of compensation that has been predicated on anything significant, nor could be sustained into the future in any meaningful sense. And so, with this in mind, I recognize that the moment that we're in relationship to AI specifically, while in many ways is very nascent, has moved, I think, at such an accelerated pace that there, I think, will continue to be a wide range of questions to ask as to, what does ownership look like in relationship to how these items have been trained. And so, that is the big question with AI. What does the intellectual property framework look like for the cultural production, as it, of course, is lifting from and borrowing from Black people and the Black diaspora? Thank you. Yes, one question, please.
Cool. Oh, God.
Hello.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I'm a soft talker, so I try to be close, but then I was too close. Thanks for your talk and the video essay. It was very interesting. You touched on this a little bit, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your process in terms of thinking about the temporality in this project, the kind of temporal bounds of the research process, but also of the kind of writing process as well. You mentioned the 19th century and lynching photographs, and getting, even though you're kind of very interested in the internet and videos, the kind of attention to visuality goes backwards in time.
That's right. Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there is also a way of thinking about the circulation of these types of images and of Blackness as a kind of fungible commodity that can be, if they're like that back end of the temporal edge goes even further, or if you discovered some things in your research that kind of could trace the lineage even further back in the kind of arc of the histories that you're talking about, and how you decided to start where you did.
That's an amazing question. I love it. So thank you for asking. And I know we're over time, but I'm going to take time to reflect on this a little bit. So as with any book, and this was the same with my first book, I think that you go through the phase of writing basically 15 books to get to one book. And so the editorial exercise of even determining what is ending up on the page becomes its own project. So, you can see in the video essay, there were many different points in history that were cited that actually have not ended up in the book itself. But I feel that it was significant to show to you because I appreciate that the process is a big part of how I work. And I also think that it's a really important way of thinking about how to create space for discourse that kind of shows the relationship across these different generational points. For me, thinking about the work of where to draw that line, came as well as thinking about what it meant to consider this question of a time before screens, right? And so, what does circulation look like in the period of time, kind of pre-Comstock Act, which was where it then became, a legally questionable act to put certain types of what was then called kind of terroristic material into the mail. But before that existed in the United States, it, of course, was a viral sensation to send lynching postcards. And so that for me felt like a very important topic to unpack and to be able to look at, to be able to talk about the scholarship around that and to really reflect on, what was Black memorabilia, right? And the slowness of the cultural production of those materials, which often required people to take very heavy camera equipment into public space to create documentation of acts of terrorism, and then to have those things circulated where, as part of a mode of acquiring wealth, right, they were sold at such frequency and at such a volume that folks, of course, would receive them in all points of the world. So, you could then not only purchase them in your town, but if, it had happened in a town that was, not so far off, you could get them there. And then, of course, folks would collect them. They would then sell them, both nationally and internationally. And then, of course, preserve them over time. And the resale market of those materials has continued to be something that is significant even to this moment today. So thinking about, this question of the pairing of text and image was also a big part of making some of those decisions. And those postcards for me felt very important to be able to talk about in relationship to the formal decisions around what it means to shape a mimetic process, right? How do we inform visual culture by pairing image and text, and where has that occurred before? And then, of course, to be able to think about, in the temporality of this, key moments, as I noted, of where technology advanced alongside of viewership. So, that, of course, being in relationship to a framework of broadcast, but also as well, literally with the equipment that entered into the private realm, allowed for folks to be able to see and view collectively and collaboratively, the advancement as well of public broadcast that moved from a very few number of channels, which was the case with Bloody Sunday in Selma, to a very many number of channels where, as we saw with Anita Hill, this question of the rise of CNN and public broadcast meant that many different channels could show a fractured set of assumptions and narrations around what was real and true. And of course, how those circulations dictated our understanding of the moving image. And then, of course, moving forward through a wide range of points historically that allowed for us to think about key moments that have transitioned transformed, as I had mentioned before, what we might assume as blueprints, right? So how, of course, frameworks of Blackness have provided us an architecture and infrastructure to think about questions of resistance and resilience and transformation and protest. And so within this too, that was a big part of my decision making. Thank you.